The first sign something was wrong was how carefully Eleanor arranged the gifts. She always treated Christmas dinner like a performance that needed rehearsing. The silverware lined up perfectly, candles lit before sunset, name cards. Even though everyone sat in the same seats every year anyway, Rachel watched her mother move around the dining room, carrying wrapped boxes in both arms, while the rest of the family talked over football highlights and weather reports. Her younger brother, Mark, got a new drill set for the house he'd just bought. Her sister Jenna opened a velvet box and gasped loudly enough for everyone to look. Earrings, gold, probably expensive. Their mother smiled in that satisfied way she always did when people reacted correctly. Rachel already suspected her gift would be different. It usually was. Not cruel enough to confront directly, just forgettable enough to deny later. Still, when Eleanor handed her a plain white envelope, Rachel felt something small inside her chest tighten. "Open yours last?" Her mother said lightly, so she did. Inside was a folded Christmas card with snow-covered cabins on the front. Rachel opened it carefully. 2 words: next year. At first, nobody understood it. Mark laughed uncertainly. "What does that mean?" Eleanor waved a dismissive hand while sipping wine. "Rachel doesn't really need anything right now. I figured I'd save her gift for later." "For what later?" Jenna asked. "Oh, you know," Eleanor shrugged. "Maybe when there's finally a baby to shop for." The room quieted in that uncomfortable way families do when everyone notices something cruel at the same time, but silently agrees not to interfere. Rachel smiled automatically. It was a reflex she'd perfected sometime during adolescence. Daniel's hand found hers beneath the tablecloth. He squeezed once, not hard, not protective, just present. Rachel heard herself laugh softly. Smart budgeting. Her mother smiled, relieved Rachel had made it easy again. Dinner continued. Nobody mentioned it afterward. That part stayed with Rachel more than the card itself. Not one person said that was unnecessary, not even later in the kitchen while dishes were being rinsed and stacked. Her family moved around her comfortably, the way people move around permanent furniture. On the drive home, Daniel kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other resting loosely near the gear shift. "You okay?" he asked finally. Rachel looked out the passenger window at dark neighborhoods glowing with leftover Christmas lights. Yeah, but the answer sounded tired even to her. At home, she changed into sweatpants and began folding wrapping paper into neat piles for recycling. Daniel leaned against the doorway watching her. "She embarrassed you." Rachel kept folding. "She always says things without thinking." "I don't think that's true." That made her stop. Because he wasn't angry, he sounded careful, as if he'd spent years editing himself around her family and had finally grown exhausted. A week later, Eleanor left Rachel a voicemail asking if the insurance portal password had changed again. Another voicemail 2 days after that about prescription coverage. No mention of Christmas. Rachel sat at her office desk listening to the messages while spreadsheets glowed across her monitor. 6 years earlier, after Eleanor's divorce, Rachel had quietly added her mother to the health insurance plan offered through her employer. Eleanor's medications were expensive, and the private plans she could afford barely covered specialist visits. At the time, it had felt temporary. Most sacrifices do at first. Rachel never told her siblings because she knew exactly how the conversation would go. "You're better with this stuff. Mom trusts you more. You don't have kids yet anyway." Daniel found her one night staring at the insurance documents spread across the kitchen table. He didn't sit down immediately, just looked at the papers, then at her. "Would anybody notice what you do?" he asked quietly. If you stopped doing it, Rachel wanted to answer immediately. Instead, she stared at the monthly premium deductions highlighted across 6 years of statements. Thousands of dollars, not ruined financially kind of money, just steady, invisible erosion. On January 3rd, during her lunch break, Rachel logged into the employee benefits portal. The enrollment window was still open for another 48 hours. She hovered over her mother's profile for nearly a full minute, then she removed her from the policy. No speech, no revenge fantasy, just the strange feeling of setting down something heavy after carrying it too long. 12 days later, her phone rang while she was standing in a grocery store comparing pasta sauces. Eleanor sounded breathless. "My insurance was declined at the pharmacy." Rachel closed her eyes briefly. "I know. What do you mean you know? I took you off the plan." Silence, not dramatic silence. Confused silence. "You took me off?" "Yes. Why would you do that without warning me?" Rachel stared at shelves stacked with canned tomatoes, because the truthful answer sounded almost childish when spoken aloud, because she was tired, because humiliation accumulates interest, because she no longer understood why her kindness had started feeling mandatory. "I should talk to you sooner," Rachel said carefully. "That part's on me." Eleanor's breathing steadied slightly, preparing for argument, but Rachel continued before she could. "I started feeling less like your daughter and more like infrastructure." Nothing answered her at first. Somewhere over the phone, Rachel could hear a cartwheel squeaking against grocery store tile on her mother's end too. Finally, Eleanor spoke, quieter now. "I didn't realize you felt that way." Rachel almost laughed at the sentence, not because it was false, because it was probably true. A few weeks later, after Eleanor arranged a different insurance plan, Rachel received a text while leaving work. "I didn't realize you were waiting to be thanked." Rachel read it twice in the parking lot. The message irritated her because it still misunderstood the wound. But beneath the defensiveness, there was something unfamiliar. Recognition, maybe small, imperfect, late. Rachel locked her phone without replying. Then she got into her car and drove home before dark for the first time in months. No celebration waited for her there, just dinner with Daniel. Quiet, ordinary. But for once, the silence in her life no longer felt like surrender.